Happy Wisdom Wednesday, everyone. So this week we're going to go through some books a week, but a more important lesson that I've been asked so much, which is how do you read so many books? How do you get faster and more efficient at reading? Well, I'm going to show you my lessons here, and here's a surprise. For many of you who've reached out, you've been very vulnerable in saying, hey, look, Omar, I'm actually dyslexic. I don't know if I can do that. Well, guess what? I myself was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was a kid, right? But that changed the day that I decided to say, as an adult, that today is the day that I'm going to be not only a good reader, but a great leader. I'm going to be a learning machine. And so I'm going to show you some tips and tricks on how you can be more efficient at reading, not only to read more books faster, but comprehend more, and more importantly, create a practice of reading into your life. So let's start with the most important question, which is why read? Like, why should you incorporate reading into your busy life as it is? Well, if you look at the most successful people in the not only business world, but in history. So we can think about Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, of course. Look at history, Alexander the Great, for example, right? They all at some point, they had mentors, they learned from people, right? And of course, they incorporated reading as part of their life. Alexander the Great supposedly carried and had a library travel with him. Bill Gates spends literally a week or two a year only reading. Warren Buffett brags about how much he reads, right? And so the ability to digest and learn information at a very fast and efficient pace is super important. Plus, think of it like this. Would you agree that if Bill Gates sat down and was your mentor for business, you would be pretty successful? Right. But you don't have the time nor the luck to get Bill Gates as a mentor. However, if you look at the great books of the past, there's really nothing new under the sun. The same problems we're trying to solve today, self-development, discipline, adversity, all these different things, someone else went through it. Look, if you like Mark Benioff, I have a lot of respect for Mark Benioff. I learned there's actually a book that he wrote. A lot of people don't even know about it. I went and bought it. Mark Burnett, the guy who created all these famous shows like the Shark Tank, The Apprentice. Guess what? Somewhere in here, he actually wrote a book. No one knows about it. All this person's wisdom and talent secrets, they put it in a book for you to read it. And a lot of people decide not to read it. And so learning how to get access to these things and read them and digest them and apply them is the most important thing you're going to learn in your life. Now, here's the next thing. You have to learn to get through books faster. Many, many years ago, one of my best friends, who was also a medical student at the time, told me, you know, Omar, you gotta pick up this pace of how much you read. Like, you're spending a month or two reading these books like on the side for fun. You should read faster. And he was absolutely right, because here's the thing. Think of two people right now. One person reads a book cover to cover, right, and takes a whole month to read it, versus another person reads 10 to 12 books and gets the main pieces that they need, right? This person over here is going to adapt and evolve a lot faster, which brings me to a very important point I want to bring up. With a little bit of internet magic, this is The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. He actually coined the term memes and memetics, but he also wrote about the idea of a simulation. Right? And he writes that one way for our genes, right? Think about organisms and survival and biology. One way for our genes to solve the problem of making predictions in rather unpredictable environments is to build in a capacity for learning. The advantage of this sort of programming is that it greatly cuts down the cost of numbered detailed rules that have to be built into the original program. And it's also capable of coping with changes in the environment that could not have been predicted in detail. And he goes on to explain that the thing about going through trial and error is that when you go through trial and error, it's very time consuming, it consumes a lot of energy, and it could be fatal. As the great Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, always say, yeah, failure is a great teacher, but what's even better than that is learning through the failure of others and not your own. And so that's the whole point of a simulation, right? A simulation, we go through it in our mind. In the military, they use simulations to simulate different scenarios. In our head, if we're going to go make a decision, right, or something happen in our life, we simulate all kinds of things in our head very quickly as to what decision we should make and why. The problem with that is that it's based off of a lot of faulty data, childhood traumas, adult failures, right, and anecdotes, versus going to the great mentors of the past in these books and learning directly for them. Look, I have yet to be in a situation where I'm running a billion-dollar company, but I don't wait for that situation to learn from people who run billion-dollar companies, or learn from great generals or people in history who are faced with incredibly, incredibly difficult life or death decisions to understand how they used models to make those best decisions, right? And then as the unpredictability of my environment happens, right, I'm able to immediately assert those models without even remembering where I read it, but understanding that, oh yeah, you know what, in this scenario, here's how the simulation can happen, and here's actually my pathway to success. The moment I started doing this many years ago, my life transformed and changed for the better. Now, here's the other thing, right? You cannot get hooked on this old concept of I have to read one book at a time, cover to cover. Hate to say this, but every author knows this dirty secret I'm going to say, and they're going to be pissed with me, but it's true. None of these books is worth reading cover to cover, right? And the reason why is that most books maybe have one or two, maybe three really good ideas, and more specifically, really good ideas for you, right? Look, the majority of knowledge that I get from, let's say, this book, Good Strategy and Bad Strategy, or even Crossing the Chasm, right, is only valuable to me based on the point in time I'm at and the information I need. So look, let's pull Crossing the Chasm out. This is one of my favorite business books. You should definitely buy it and read it. The thing about this book, as you see, there's a technology adoption curve. There's different people who adopt technology at a certain point in time. Guess what the majority of my focus in this book is? Here at the very beginning. Early innovators and pioneers, right? You know why? Yeah, I do learn about this part, but in the world that I live in, which is startups, most of my time is focused here. So I spend less time focusing on learning about this area. I worry about it when it comes, and more time over here. And so most books are like that. They're going to have one or two really good ideas for you. And so think about Pareto's principle. 20% of the whole is going to give you 80% of the full yield. And in real life, that's actually an even more aggressive thing. If you think about LinkedIn, and let's say the number of people who create content on there, it's maybe like 10 or 5% of people on LinkedIn create 90% or 95% of the content. Same thing with these books. When you pick up a book like this, 20% of the information here is going to give you 80% of the yield. And so you have to think about books like that you're like a detective or a gold miner, looking for those nuggets, looking for those clues, things that you need, right? And when you start thinking about this, you feel less bad about skimming and jumping around books, which leads me to my next point. When you buy books, right, pick them up, skim around, jump around. That's okay. And just think about when you watch TV or Netflix or Hulu. Do you watch only one show all the time? Maybe you might be binge watching, but a lot of times when we open TV, we jump around channels, we check out different things based on our mood. Look at my office here, right? I have all these books here. I have a reading corner there. I have more books on my desk and throughout my house, because based on the mood that I'm in, I'll go and check out a new book. That's how you make reading a constant habit every day. Now, let's get into how you can actually read faster and more efficiently. Now, let's start with dispelling some myths. So this book I actually bought back in 2009 when I started medical school. It's called Speed Reading by Tony Bazan. And I'm going to put up this quick screenshot and take a quick look at these lists of these so-called beliefs of reading. Now think about how many of these things we've been taught when we were in school, right? Read slowly and carefully leads to better comprehension. Each word should be read as an individual unit. Finger pointing is wrong, right? All this is nonsense, right? And that's the first step to reading more efficiently better, is to understand the rules that we were taught as kids and even as adults as to how we should read. It's all wrong, right? All of it. So let's start out with the first thing, right? Which is reading word for word, and more specifically, how we use our eyes. Now, when you read a book, you'll notice that many times you're reading like this. To achieve this, we make use of the keyword concept. That is literally how you're reading, and you're teaching yourself that. That's why it takes so long for you to read, and it's exhausting. You don't even remember what you read. Versus, to achieve this, we make use of the keyword concept, right? Much faster, right? That's at least speaking it. Now, the thing about this is that, look, you're listening and watching me talk about this concept. Have you listened to every single word I've said? No, because not every word is of the same value, right? And that's where you have to filter things out. Now, most of these books, right? I told you there's maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 really good ideas. Well, guess what? Most of these books can also be summarized in about 10, 20, 30 pages. But to sell a book, you need to fill it up with a lot of pages, right? You got to get through that fluff and get to the source of truth. You got to get to those pearls of wisdom. How do you get there? Well, first thing is training your eyes. So if you think about this, pay attention to me and keep watching my face. Can you see what I'm doing here? How many fingers am I holding up? What about now, right? That's your peripheral vision. We use it all the time when we're driving, playing sports, doing things. We don't use them when we're reading. And that's what you have to start doing. So the best way to start, and I know you're going to freak out when I tell you this, but you also have to start getting in better habits of writing in your books. Not the old ones, of course, but these ones. The best way to start is to open your book and go to any page, and I marked it down here, and look at the edges of the page, right? And try and draw a straight line down, just separating one or two words on the outer edge, one or two words on the other edge. And I want you to practice reading just in the middle, right? Just staying here, never going outside. And you'll notice your peripheral vision works. You will not lose comprehension. That by itself just improves your reading speed. Then over time, you can start closing these gaps in a little bit more and doing it even better, right? And then now, instead of going from fixation point to fixation point, you're now reading and using your peripheral vision. Now let's talk about fixation points. Now, when your eyes move, if you think about when you look at something, if you point your finger and you scan, you'll notice your eye actually jumps and tracks around. That's called saccadic tracking. And the reason why is that that's from a fixation point. When we read, we are teaching ourselves to go to fixation point to fixation point. So we focus on word for word, right? And then we end up regressing and going backwards and rereading what we read. Well, this is a math problem. So how do we decrease the amount of fixation points and decrease the amount of time we go back and regress, right? Well, aside from using our peripheral vision, and this is where we were taught not to do this in school, use a pointer, a pacer. For me, I use this amazing pen given to me by a young man named Daniel, who I know is going to be the next great businessman and scientist. You heard it here first. It's a Caran d'Ache. It's a great Swiss pen. You can buy these for $20, $30 on Amazon, but this is a very special one because you can't get these orange ones anymore. And so you can take your pacer, put it on the page, and start moving fast like this. Don't stop, and make your eyes follow, right? Because a lot of times, that's how our brain is. We have to kind of coach and manage our brain like an animal. And so by doing this, I'm teaching it to move forward. Now, the question I know you're saying is like, well, Omar, if I don't understand something, just keep moving forward. You'll understand it. It's fine. And think of it like this. Right now, the way you read is like driving a car, and you've been driving a Ferrari at 5 miles per hour. So the next test or next exercise I want you to do is pick up a book, draw your lines, get used to, reading with your periphery, and then use your pacer, and I want you to go very fast, just really fast, to the point that it's uncomfortable, right? You're not, forget about comprehension, everything, just try and follow and pick up as much as you can. Do that for 5 to 10 minutes. What are you doing now? I just had you take that Ferrari, and I had you go from 5 miles per hour to like 100 miles per hour. That's really, really intense. And you're like, oh my God, I can't, this is real uncomfortable, I can't handle it. But after doing that for 5 to 10 minutes, then go back, instead of going quote unquote 100 miles per hour in your Ferrari, now just go 50, right? The way our brain works is that it anchors to the new norm, right? The new norm in your head is you just went, super, super fast reading for 5-10 minutes. Do this every day. Now, the second half of your reading is just try going a little bit slower than that. So, not 100 miles per hour, not 5, right in the middle, right? Then you start getting used to this, and you start becoming less afraid of, let's say, not understanding a word or skipping a word, right? A lot of people who have English as their second language, they get hung up on the words. I tell them, like, just go for comprehension. Just like when you're speaking a new language, you don't try and understand every single word. When you hear the whole sentence of what someone's saying, you understand that they're saying, oh, go down here to the coffee shop, right? You don't need to learn every single word, right? That's a very, very powerful thing that I just showed you about using your periphery and then a pacer to start coaching yourself up to read faster. Now, next thing I want to show you is how you should maybe go through books, right? If a book is worth reading once, it's worth reading a second time. And if it's worth reading a second time, it's going to be worth reading third, fourth time. Right? So what I like to do when I get a new book, and sometimes in the airport I'll do this, I'll look at the book, I'll read the title, of course, judge the book by cover, because people do, right? Are indispensable. I'll open it. Maybe I'll read the contents here. I'll go to the back, read what's written in the back. I'll flip through it, right? Kind of scanning. I'm getting my brain used to this. I'm saying, okay, there's some pictures and graphs here, right? Okay, then I go to the table of contents, right? Well, guess what's in the table of contents? Not only are the chapters, but a little summary of each chapter. Guess how much time I just saved by doing this, right? A lot. So now I get an idea of the chapter. Maybe I'll quickly speed read the preface and the introduction, because a lot of times they'll introduce those concepts as to what you're about to learn. So now I've primed my brains about who the author is, what this book is about, what's inside the books, the contents, and I've skimmed through. And a lot of times I'll go to the very end of the book to see in the last chapter, because in many business books, they summarize the whole book there. That doesn't mean you should use that to replace the book, but then also, again, think about it. You're a detective. This teaches you as to what you need to look for, right? So just at the end of the book, 7 abilities of the linchpin. This is like the book right here summed up. 7 things that make a linchpin, right? Providing a unique interface between members of the organization, delivering unique creativity, managing situation organization. And by reading this, then I say, you know what? Providing deep domain knowledge. That's interesting because I don't know how to actually do that. Let me find a chapter that talks about this. Now, not every book you have to do it this way, but this is a great way to start. And of course, as you're going through and using your pacer and reading, I like to use certain tools as I read. Here are my favorite tools to use. So when it comes to reading books, you have to make it fun, right? The more enjoyable you make it, the more you'll read. So again, for me, I invest in having like a really nice chair at home, a good place to sit down and read. I have the books right there. But then also the tools you use are super, super important. So for one, all my books, and let me show you a great example of that. Crossing the Chasm, as you can see, is really marked up. And mainly because I've had this book for quite a while. I need to buy a new edition, but look how many earmarks I have. It's written up a lot. So number one, highlighters, right? I think having a good highlighter really helps the process. And don't buy the one where you have to take the cap off. You want one that immediately gives you the highlighter chisel right away. The one that I like to use are these, the Handy S-Liner. Highlighter has their own, but the Handy S-Liner, I just love the shape of it. I like the click of it. It's a very nice click. It highlights extremely, extremely well. And you can actually buy refills for this, so I don't have to toss this thing away. I can reuse it many, many times. So that's my favorite highlighter to use. And I like orange just because it stands out really well. Choose one highlighter. Don't get too crazy with it, okay? That's the highlighter. The second thing is, Thomas Jefferson actually used to have conversations with his books, supposedly, and write in them. So I always have a good pen nearby to write in the books, because as I'm, again, my Netflix and chill is multiple books, so I'm reading a lot of different books across a very broad area of topics: autobiographies, history, business, psychology. And so these ideas will sort of, mesh together and start weaving together, right? Kind of like what we do here in Mind Loop. So as that happens, I'll take out my pen and write in the pages maybe the name of a book and maybe a chapter. If it's a really good quote or something, I'll go grab the book, I'll write it down, right? Because now I'm interacting with the book, having fun, right? And of course, I always recommend get a good writing instrument. Make this an enjoyable event, right? Don't buy a crappy pen. For me, I love these Caran d'Ache Swiss pens. You can buy these on Amazon. They are only 20 to 30 bucks. I love these, okay? I'll leave a link in the show notes where you can buy them, okay? Great, great, great. The last thing is, if I find a concept that's not only worth highlighting, but I want to have such quick, easy access to it, I use these little Post-it flags, right? You just pull them out like so, and you just put it on the book. And the reason why I do that is because sometimes when I go back to a book, again, I put the books up here. Some books I haven't gone back to in maybe a year or two. I open, I'm like, oh, there's a couple of tags in here. Let's take a look, for example. So so Crossing the Chasm, this is Crossing the Chasm's grandfather, Diffusions of Innovations. I don't have as many highlights here, right? But I have a few pages marked out. So why did I do it? So I marked this one. I remember this actually. This is actually a really valuable case study. Now I remember exactly why I put that there, right? So that's what I do. The other thing I like to suggest to people is right on the inside of the books, I always put the date that I bought the book, what's going on in my life, and how I'm going to use the book. It makes the book a lot more sentimental. Plus, it keeps people from borrowing your books. I'll trust some of my closest friends with my life. I will not trust them with my books because you never get them back. That's how books work. Don't loan your books out. You never know when you need it. And finally, on those days, let's say you want to write and everything, I always suggest getting some fun journals. One of the journals I love is Karst, K-A-R-S-T. They actually make their journals out of stone, right? This is actually stone paper, so it's waterproof. It has a very interesting texture to it. And so in these little journals, many times, on a Friday night or Saturday night, I'll sit down, I have a beer, I'll have like 3 or 4 or 5 books with me. Sometimes I used to go to a restaurant and do this, and I'll have a drink, you know, have a nice dinner. I'll read these books, jump around. When I read something interesting that I want to try and remember, I'll write it down. So these journals are just full of so much. They're like little miniature books, just full of extremely interesting wisdom and lessons and stuff. And so that's what I have for my books. So that is technically your books of the week, your lesson of the week. I hope you enjoyed. I hope it helped. If it did, or you have some recommendations or questions, please drop them in the comments below. I'm actually going to record a podcast for this that goes a little bit deeper into these concepts, so check that out. If you want me to make another video diving into some of these concepts, let me know. I'm here to help you guys. So, as always, happy Wisdom Wednesday. Go out, get some books, start reading, add to your library. If you don't have a library, pick a corner of your room, maybe choose a closet, start building it up. You don't have to be great to start, but you got to start to be great. And the great mentors of the world and history are waiting for you. So, that being said, be safe. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.